What's up, everybody? Big Italy 42 here, talking about FanDuel wide receiver options for Week 9 action for your cash games and your GPPs. Looking at some top options, some mid-range options, and a little bit of in between here. This is one of those slates where I'm not particularly enamored with a lot of guys. As you know, my favorite receiver in the game, Mike Evans, played Thursday night and had a monster game last night, actually. But this is a situation where you can lock in your safe options, and there are two guys in particular that I do like quite a bit that I'm going to be locking into my cash games. Starting off with Antonio Brown. Obviously nothing official yet, but it does look like Ben Roethlisberger is at least more likely to play this weekend. And this is a Ravens defense that has just allowed some monster games. For their first 6 games, they allowed a wide receiver to score 2 or more touchdowns against them. This is a secondary that ranks 24th against number 1 wide receivers. This is a defense that, it seems like we see the Ravens and Steelers kind of get up for the games against each other, regardless of who may be up or down in the standings. And we all know that it's the Ravens down in the standings right now, and usually. But Antonio Brown is one of those guys that's just incredibly safe. I mean, even with Landry Jones under center last week against the Patriots, he still went over 100 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but his price tag has dropped quite a bit here, only 8,700. Which still seems like a steep tag, but there's a guy you can certainly afford. There's plenty of value across the board here. I'll get to a couple of those guys in a minute. But if you're going to be paying up, you got no Julio Jones, no Mike Evans. I certainly don't trust Odell Beckham in cash games in that matchup. So if you just want the safety and stability of a guy who's going to get you, 15 plus fantasy points, then Antonio Brown just makes a whole lot of sense there. Next up, another guy I really like, Devontae Adams, $7,100 against the Colts. Team total of 30.5 for the Green Bay Packers here at home. Another shootout expected. And Randall Cobb is a guy who continues to be limited in practice, didn't play last week, but did play the previous week, and Devontae Adams still saw a ton of targets. He has 30 targets now over the last 2 games. Obviously, that monster Green Bay total. James Starks, there was speculation maybe he could return this week. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it's still the Ty Montgomery show in that backfield now. Davis came and went already. He has been released. So, this is a team that still just does not have any running game. So Aaron Rodgers is going to continue to throw the ball a ton. Over those 30 targets in 2 weeks, we've seen Adam catch 25 of those for 206 and 2 scores. Only half-point PPR on FanDuel, of course, but at $7,100, a guy who's seeing 15 targets a game over the last 2 weeks, not to say he'll see 15 again, but if Cobb sits out, I'd say you can easily project him for 10 to 12 targets in this one. And if this one stays close, if the Colts are able to score points and keep this one close, you could definitely see some big-time upside for him as well. So definitely a safe option for you here for your cash games. He's going to see a whole lot of volume in this one, regardless of Cobb's status. GPP wide receivers, I'm looking at Brandon Cooks, $7,600, facing the 49ers. Talked a couple weeks ago about how the 49ers were the worst team in the league against number 1 wide receivers, and Mike Evans had his way with them. Obviously, they're still ranked 32nd in the league, the worst team in the league against number 1 receivers. And the thing about Brandon Cooks here is, we've got a team total of 27.5, which is a really high number for a Saints team that's on the road. Obviously, they're significantly better at home. Brandon Cooks has now scored a touchdown in 3 straight games, and he has plenty of upside as well. Looking at some of his game logs here, obviously that first week went off for a monster score, 6 for 143 and 2 touchdowns. Had that 7 for 173 and a touchdown against Carolina. Last 2 weeks, pretty tough matchups against Kansas City and Seattle, and still went 7 for 58 and 1, 4 for 44 and 1. So like I said, 3 straight weeks with touchdowns. This is a spot where, you get a guy like Brandon Cooks who hasn't had a double-digit target game yet this year, but you don't really need him to. He's a big play guy. He's the kind of guy that you get the ball in his hands and you let him go to work in the open field. And, this is just a pretty bad 49ers team. And with the whole running back situation, you don't really know with Ingram or Hightower. Obviously, there's been speculation Hightower is getting more carries. He pretty much dominated the carries last week after Ingram fumbled. So you want pieces of this game. Saints should score a lot of points, and it makes a lot of sense to go in GPPs with a guy like Brandon Cooks who gets red zone looks, and he's a big play threat at any time. All right, moving on here next to Des Bryant. Cowboys, another one of those teams with a monster team total, nearly 28 points. Obviously, everybody in the world is going to be on Ezekiel Elliott, as they very well should be. But this is still a Browns team that, despite Joe Hayden being there at times, he's missed some time. Looks like he's going to be fine for this week again. But they ranked 31st against number one wide receivers. We saw AJ Green absolutely destroy these guys a couple weeks ago. Obviously, quite a bit of that was on that Hail Mary pass at the end of the first half. But Des Bryant's a guy that I don't think a lot of people will be on, especially because Zeke Elliott will be so popular. So at his price tag here, this is a guy who had a really, really weird line last week. Had 14 targets and only caught 4 of them. He did find the end zone, though. 113 yards and a touchdown. That's 2 straight weeks with a score for him. There was some injury concern with him, but full practice on Thursday. Looks like he's going to be good. He had some knee discomfort, but he says he's going to be full speed. With Corey Coleman back for the Browns, more on him later. I'm a fan of his this week and in general, but I'm hoping that the Browns can at least keep this one competitive and have the Cowboys throw into the second half. And certainly Des Bryant, not a guy that has the type of floor I want in cash games at his price, especially with many better options out there. But this is certainly a guy that I want some pieces of in GPPs because he does have some big-time upside if this one stays close. Moving on here to value plays. Brian Quick, $4,500. I know it sounds disgusting. He's not the type of guy that you feel comfortable about playing in your cash games, but this is a guy that, we had high hopes for a couple of years ago, thinking that he would be kind of a breakout player. That hasn't happened, but what he has done is be fairly consistent. He's absolute minimum salary at $4,500. Last week, 4 catches on 9 targets for 92 yards. Week before, 5 for 61, 3 for 51, 2 for 69 with 2 scores, 2 for 53 and a score. So this is a guy that's getting looks. He's absolute minimum salary. You're not going to find another guy at absolute minimum that you feel like actually has a little bit of a floor, and that's relative to his salary. He doesn't have a floor of 7-8 points. I mean, his floor is very, very low. But, I mean, he does get looks. He gets red zone looks. He's a big target. And, with this being a situation where Carolina's tough against the run, not good at all against the pass, 5th against the run, 29th against the pass. This is a situation where you expect the Rams to be airing it out. And at minimum salary, if you can get Brian Quick to find the end zone there, get 5 or 6 catches, I mean, that instantly pays off in a huge way. So I'm a big fan of his. Next up, Stephon Diggs from the Vikings. This is a guy, obviously better reserved for your GPPs. Vikings looked great a couple weeks ago. All of a sudden, they're kind of falling apart. But Diggs finally broke out of his slump last week with a solid game. He's sitting there at 6,500 here in this matchup. Last week against the Bears, saw a huge amount of targets once again. Granted, they were playing from behind for a lot of that game, but 8 for 76 and a score there. 6,500 for Stephon Diggs in a game here where he's facing a Lions team that is one of the worst pass defenses in football, 28th against number ones, and among the worst against pass overall. So, I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Minnesota Vikings offense at all, but I do think he's a guy that could give you some sneaky upside here on a week that there really just aren't a lot of great options at wide receiver. One other guy that I'll mention here, not written up in the article, I've got him listed in a stack here, is Tyreek Hill for the Kansas City Chiefs. Jeremy Maclin is banged up. He's dealing with a bad hamstring right now. We've got, obviously, Nick Foles under center, who loves to throw the ball. We've got Jarkandrick West, really is the only healthy running back. Tyreek Hill actually leads the Chiefs in touchdowns this year with 4. He scored in 2 straight games and 3 out of 4. Only had 1 target in that game against New Orleans, had 6 last week, 3 weeks ago. So this is not a big volume guy. But if Maclin is limited or unable to play, you get this guy at $4,700 who is obviously getting looks down the field and could pay off for you in a nice way at $4,700. All right, thanks for hanging out with me here. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out the rest of our content at dailyfantasycafe.com.